OneBridge Knowledge Center. Today we're going to be looking at how to install an OB390 GPS fleet tracking unit. First thing I want to talk about is what's inside the package when you open it up. In the box you're going to find a GPS, of course a GPS unit, a puck style antenna, the wiring harness, and the hardware needed. And here's a look at what your unit will look like. And then of course you see the wiring harness laying over top of that. You're also going to find in there the puck antenna. Now the puck antenna looks something like this. On the back side you're going to have an adhesive strip that you can take off and pop on the windshield. And then at the end of the wire on the antenna you're going to have two connections, a GPS and a cellular connection that you'll actually screw into the box when you get done with your installation. Alright, and there's a picture of some of the tools that you'll need. Of course there's others that you need too, but a good pair of wire strippers, a battery operated drill probably help you out while you're installing these. And then you may also need some other spade terminals, maybe a ring terminal for a ground, that kind of thing, which we'll show you there. Now to get started, what you want to do is once you've opened up your vehicle, you get on the driver's side, you're going to want to find where the majority of the wires are under the dash, and then depending on vehicle, that's going to be in different spots. This vehicle, the easiest way to get to the wires, of course, is to go straight to the key. You may not be able to get behind the key, so you can find your wires under the dash. So just carefully pry your dash apart, and then once you get that open, you'll see there looks like a bunch of wires. And what you want to do now is grab the remainder of your wiring harness and strip off your wire, spade terminals and everything set up, and get that wiring harness ready to connect to your ignition wires and everything once you find those. Alright, in the next step you're going to grab your multimeter, and what you want to make sure of here while you're doing these tests, you want to make sure that you put your ground that is on your multimeter, or you put the lead that's the ground, you want to put it in close to the same spot you're actually going to ground the unit to itself. So find somewhere in the chassis to clip that lead on, or hold it up against a piece of metal that's in the chassis, or wherever you decide to ground it. Now this is the most important step in this install, and what you want to do is you want to make sure that you find two things when you're under the dash. You want to find an ignition constant, or I'm sorry, just a constant hot, which is a wire that has 12 volts on it at all times. And then you're going to find an ignition sense wire. And what an ignition sense wire is a wire that has no power on it, but then when the key gets turned, it will actually show as 12 volts, and it will maintain a voltage all the way through the cranking and the starting of the vehicle. And we're going to show you what this looks like. Okay, right here you see, here's our constant wire. And as you can see, as he's putting it on, you can see the meter running at 12. Now what he's doing is he's trying to find an ignition hot. So you can see here that this wire has no power on it, but when he turns the key, now it does have power. And then once he turns the key off, you'll notice that the power goes back to 0. So just make sure you test that a couple of times through and through. Again, constant hot is going to be ignition, is going to have power on it all the time. Doesn't matter if the vehicle is on or off. And then your ignition sense wire is going to have no power on it when the key is in the off position, but when the key goes to the accessory position, it gets power, and it maintains power all the way through the actual cranking and the starting of the vehicle. Now once you're done with that, go ahead and pull those wires out and identify them, and take a look at your wiring diagram. And then from there you're going to want to we use these T-taps. You can use what we call it a circle termination, but it's a little circle with a little thing in the middle that when you press down on it, it cuts the wires. We use these T-taps from 3M, but all you do is get your wire in place, And again, take a look at your wiring diagram and recognize which wire is which on your wiring harness for the unit. Your red wire is going to be the constant hot, which you can see here, so he's making that connection. And then you just clamp down on that, and it's in place. And then shut the cover, and that one's good to go. And then on your ignition sense wire, which is going to be a white wire on your GPS unit wiring harness. And then the same thing as your constant. Just get your T-tap in place and connect everything together. You see him insert the wire, squeeze the connection into place, and when you hear it click, it's good. Then snap over top, and there you go. That part is complete. The part that you don't see is the ground wire, and the ground wire, of course, just has a ring terminal on it with a self-tapping screw, and you just screw it in to a piece of metal that's under that chassis somewhere to give you a good ground. The next step is going to be antenna placement, and antenna placement is fairly important. If an antenna is not placed properly, the unit can do what's called mailboxing or not work at all. And what mailboxing is where it just kind of sporadically comes off and on and reports what's going on. So you want to make sure that your windshield, that you definitely get the antenna in a spot that has complete visibility of the sky. Some vehicles come with like a metal little wing or roof extender that goes out over the front of the vehicle. So if your vehicle has one of those, make sure you put it down in the bottom corner of the windshield instead of the top, because that metal piece will actually hinder the antenna from getting a good view of the sky and locking on to the satellites that it needs to do. So once you get that complete, you may have to actually take apart some stuff on the A-arm. But once you figure out the correct antenna placement, go ahead and peel your adhesive back off and go ahead and stick your antenna in place. And then you can begin to route your wires around. Of course, with this installation, what you'll see here in a second is we actually did have to remove this handle and the plastic from the A-arm to get the wires into place. And one thing I'll note is if your vehicle is equipped with airbags, especially if there's an airbag in the A-pillar, you want to make sure that you get this plastic piece off carefully, but then also that you route the wires behind the airbag, which you'll see it packed in there, but you want to make sure that you get the wires either below that airbag or behind that airbag, just in case if there is, in the event of an accident, that wire doesn't get wrapped around that airbag and either whip that antenna back and hit a passenger or hinder the airbag from deploying properly. So as you'll see here, he's just taking the screws out of this handle to get this plastic piece off. And once that comes out, you can go ahead and remove your plastic piece and run your wires down behind that plastic, and then under the dash. You want to make sure that your antenna wires go under the dash and pretty much out the same hole in the dash that you have used to wire your constant hot and your ignition hot wire, and that just allows for less complication when you go to clean up your install and zip tie your wires together and push everything into the dash. So now he's running, what you'll see now is he's running the wire. And another thing I'll mention while we're watching this, the other thing I'll mention while he's installing this antenna is be very, very careful with this antenna wire, because if this antenna wire gets nicked in any way, it can mess up the antenna, and you'll actually have to purchase a new one. So just be very careful. Don't try to force the wire into a location. Don't try to push it in with a screwdriver or anything like that, because if you do, you run the risk of nicking that antenna wire, and when you do that, the antenna will no longer work properly and will actually have to be replaced. So just keep that in mind as you're running your antenna wires. that's close to being complete. Now we're going to take a look at, okay, our antenna wires run. As you see, we use the same hole that we use to wire up our constant, our ignitions. And now what we're going to do is hook up the antenna, and you'll notice the antenna connections have two separate sizes, so you can't get them wrong, but screw them in hand tight and crank your vehicle up. And now what you want to do is let the unit hang, and once you see that green and orange light right there on the front of that box, when both of those lights are solid and blinking, maybe every 10 to 15 seconds, then your installation is complete, and you're now ready to go ahead and zip tie your box up, which you'll see right here. And just make sure you know, try to get them neat as much as possible, but don't put any excess tension on any of your connections. So make sure when you're zip tying everything together that you keep the wires somewhat loose, so that there's not any fold in the wires or really hard bends in any of the wires. You definitely don't want that when you're buttoning this thing up. So as you can see now, it's zip tied up, everything's ready to go. And now all you're seeing is we're just trying to find a spot to put the box inside the dash where it's going to be out of the way. So we're zip tying up everything and making it look nice and neat, because you definitely don't want to leave, you know, a big cobweb of wires underneath the dash. That can cause a lot of problems for somebody if they were ever having to get in the dash. And there you go, it's complete. Go ahead and zip tie up your excess wire, and when you get done, go ahead and clip the end of that zip tie off, and then you go ahead, put your dash back together, and you're ready to go.